Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have on our friend Elie Mystal, lawyer, the nation's justice correspondent, host of its legal podcast, Contempt of Court, and New York Times best-selling author of the book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Elie, good to see you, and congratulations on your new dog. You got a new dog. So you're
Oh,
telling
thank you
us, I
so
love
much.
dogs.
I'm happy about the new dog. I'm happy about the Mets so far. Hopefully, I mean, by the time we're going on to the LDS, a tough game tonight against the Brewers, but
They got to win.
always
I'm a Met fan too. I was rooting for them last night. I thought they were going to win it. I'm like, two. I said, this is not like the Mets. There's got to be pain. You
yes.
can't do. I used to joke my act. Being Palestinian is like being a Mets fan. Like at the beginning of every season, you're like, this is going to be our year, and then halfway through, like this is going to be awful. Like that. That's
Yeah,
how.
I always analogize it to like being a Met fan prepared me for being a Democrat, right? Because like you have the right of it, but you'll often lose, right? Like and whenever you win, it's like it's amazing we actually won, and when you lose, it's like, well, of course the Yankees won. Why would anything
Look, they
different
haven't
happen?
won a World Series in a while, and I don't. It's not like I dislike the Yankees. I do actually root for them because it's been so hard to be a Met fan. So you watch a lot of the Yankee games here, and I like, you know, Judge and Juan
So
Juan Soto. Yeah,
yeah.
his name was escaped me for a second there. There's a huge billboard of him almost from eye line from where I'm sitting in my apartment. I can look at it. I'm not even kidding. It's Judge and Soto. They're back, New York, all that stuff. So, by the way, you wrote your last book. You have a new book coming out at some point?
I do. It's in post production. I have a couple of more edits to make before the galleys go out, but it should be out sometime Q2 2025 called Bad Law 10 Popular Laws Ruining the Country.
Wow, I look forward to that. So let's talk about something fun. Jack Smith put a brief out. I know that you're so excited about this. I'm being sarcastic because, like, look, like me, I think it's great fodder for cable news, and I think it's interesting to read, but we know it's going to have no impact. And in any event, it's just a brief. I mean, it's not even like a new indictment or a decision, but there's been a feeding frenzy by the media. What is your more realistic take to all of it?
Yeah, like Dean, as you know, it just doesn't matter. Donald Trump will not be brought to justice so long as John Roberts holds breath, right? So long as John Roberts is in power, John Roberts will not allow Donald Trump to be brought to justice. So all of this is just kabuki theater. And honestly, Dean, I could not bring myself, even though it's like technically my job, I could not bring myself to waste precious hours of my life reading Jack Smith's new filing all the way through, just because I know nothing's going to come of it. Nothing is going to happen, and we need to stop pretending like there's a chance that anything will happen. Right? Trump got away with it. He got away with it because he took control of the Supreme Court. And all the time I spent screaming about how letting Republicans have generational control of the Supreme Court, I feel very much like, like I'm in the Big Lebowski now, right? You see what happens, Larry. You see what happens, Larry, when you let Republicans control the Supreme Court. It means Donald Trump gets away with it. And so Jack Smith, look, he has to be a good soldier. He has to keep fighting the good fight. He has to make these filings. He has to try, right? And I don't hold any ill will towards Jack Smith for trying, but I'm just not going to waste the precious seconds I have on this earth like pretending otherwise, right? Like John Roberts won't let this happen.
Was that, by the way, the Larry line? Is that John Goodman's character from The Big
Yeah,
Lebowski?
yeah, it's John. That's Walter Sobchak, John
Yeah,
Goodman from the Big Lebowski.
right. That's what it was because I've seen that movie many times. Being a fan of the brothers who direct that film and many other films that I like a great deal. The so look, okay, let me tell you some of the big points from that brief because
Okay,
you
yeah.
didn't
So
want.
since I
No,
didn't
no,
read it, tell me what
no.
actually.
It's the reality is the media is making it a bigger deal than it is. I have to be blunt in that it's the idea of the big takeaway is when someone rushed in and said Donald Trump, President Trump, they're going to hang Mike Pence. He said, "So what?" I'm like, "What? Okay." It doesn't. The reality is nothing in the brief adds more criminal charges. They're just a way of defending and trying to navigate a new world created by a Supreme Court that you mentioned, Justice Roberts, where they try to put Donald Trump above the law, and they have a whole bunch of little hoops they can jump through to make things that are somehow official acts that shouldn't be, and then they turn into like personal acts, and then you can prosecute them for, and that's
Yeah,
all it's going to be.
I heard one commentator or I read somewhere that one of the new bits is that It wasn't the speech on the ellipse wasn't an official act because they didn't play Hail to the Chief, which is what they play when the president is about to speak. Instead, they played like a YMCA. They played a Village People song. So like that's how we know that he was speaking in his personal capacity, not his official capacity. And it's like one of those arguments that I'm like, yeah, if the Supreme Court was based in reason and fact, yeah, that might be interesting. But like what the Supreme Court has told you, and this is look, this is happening on a kind of grand scale with the Trump prosecutions, but this happens every day in front of this Republican Supreme Court. People will make arguments that are decent arguments if you believe that the Republicans are bound by their own precedent, by their own words. But in reality, what most people don't realize is that the Republicans on the Supreme Court just say whatever is convenient for them to say to get the outcome that they want at the present moment. And so when you change the facts on them, when you use their own logic that should lead them to a different outcome, they change the logic. They change the facts. They change whatever they have to do because they are motivated not by the law. They are motivated by the outcomes. And the outcome the Supreme Court wants is for Trump to be immune for prosecution to crime. And the Supreme Court will get that outcome regardless of the arguments, regardless of the logic, and regardless of the law.
I keep telling people you don't need a law degree anymore on these hot button cases
Right?
to know where the Supreme Court's going. Look at the GOP position. They're going to get there. They'll use a Latin term here and there. They'll throw an ipsa in here, a res in there, and they'll cite to some cases that you've never heard of. And they'll be like, da-da. And you're like, look at that. Look what we've done. So they've done it. And
I
so,
say this
look,
all the time, Dean. Like, you do not need my expertise. I went to Harvard freaking law school, right? I've been reporting on these people for over a decade, and you do not need my expertise or my experience to understand what the Supreme Court will do next. Like you said, literally all you have to do is look at the Republican Party platform. All you have to do is look at Project 2025. All you have to do is figure out what helps Republicans the most, and that's what the Supreme Court will do. Where you need a person with my expertise occasionally is to tell you what helps Republicans the most, because it's not always obvious what helps Republicans the most. But once you understand what helps Republicans the most, that's what the Supreme Court's going to do.
I'm chatting with Elie Mystal. Elie, what about the role? Because reading this part of the brief, and I read a lot of it. I didn't read all of it because some of it was meaningless. And a lot of it we knew already. That's the other part. Like they went to more detail and they filled in more meat on the bones of the fake elector scheme. And we had more things going back and forth. But the elements of the crime he's charged with, nothing is new. And we may never get to a point of anything more than another hearing. And then obviously, if Trump wins, it's all over. But even if he loses this election, there'll be another hearing and there'll be appeals up to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court and all that. Not to get into that. So it made me get again enraged at the Supreme Court a little bit, but also Merrick Garland. And maybe it's misplaced at this point, but we've talked about this before. If Merrick Garland had moved swiftly and charged Donald Trump, a lot of the stuff we're dealing with now would have happened at least a year or a year or so ago. And our nation would have been more secure and safe if he had charged Donald Trump pretty swiftly, or at least appointed a special counsel as soon as he got sworn in March of 2021. And I remind people, because 2 weeks before he was sworn in, what did Donald Trump do? He went to CPAC, and the headlines were contemplating a 2024 run. He had just 6 weeks from a terrorist attack that he incited. He was talking about running. So Garland knew politics was going to be here. And the right thing was, even if he wasn't ready to charge him, appointed special counsel then, and it may have had a difference in the trajectory of the GOP. But is it academic? Is it moot? Is it a waste of time? Or is it still anger you when we think of Merrick Garland?
Look, I think his legacy is trash, right? I think history will judge Merrick Garland even more poorly than we judge him in real time. Because as you say, Dean, it is almost impossible to know what the trajectory of this country and what the trajectory of the GOP would look like had Trump been charged relatively immediately after Merrick Garland took office. We don't know if Republicans may have abandoned their love for Trump, maybe chosen a different cult leader to rally behind. We just don't know because Merrick Garland never did anything, right? I do think that the Supreme Court's willingness or decision to be completely in the bag for Trump, I do think that it helps Garland historically at some level because it kind of shows that
Hmm.
like no matter what Garland would have done, John Roberts was already in the tank. So I do think that that kind of does make his actions or inactions academic from a point of actual accountability. But as you say, even if that kind of helps him, we don't know how his prosecution might have had an effect on people's decisions, on people's political decisions, and certainly on the GOP. So I still don't think that it all looks great for Garland. But look, the other thing though that, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but it always strikes me whenever the DOJ charges somebody else, right?
Yep.
We've seen that Merrick Garland's Department of Justice was fully able to charge Eric Adams without the need of a special counsel, just like they were able to charge Bob Menendez without the need of a special counsel. It seems like the only person that needs special counsel, Donald Trump, right? And so, like, I think that those kinds of things also, as we get deeper into as history plays the long game, I think those will also make Merrick Garland look extremely weak and ineffective. His department is capable of doing the job. He's not. And that's
I
why, I mean, I don't know if you talk about this thing, but I wrote, in the Nation, I started the talking about who Kamala Harris's attorney general should be should she win the presidency. I've started talking about that already because people need to understand that the appointment for the attorney general is the most important cabinet appointment that a new president makes. It's more important than the Secretary of State. It's more important than the Secretary of Defense. It's the most important person. I actually think that, in my perfect world, the president would run with the attorney general on the same ticket in the same way that they
oh,
do with the vice president, because that job is so critical to the functioning of our laws. It is the chief enforcement officer of the United States, and we should know who you're going to pick kind of before you have to vote for people, right?
interesting.
I would like to know the answer to that question much earlier, right? So, I did some reporting, I talked to some people, about who's kind of the leader in the clubhouse for Harris and who should be and who probably isn't.
I think that's very interesting and very compelling. Now, there's another side to this. If Vice President Harris wins and Republicans gain control of the Senate, will they confirm anybody? Will they confirm anyone at all? And not just judges, but even the administration, maybe a few here and there. They'll say, okay, we should go with the Democrats, Murkowski, and a couple of others. But I don't know. We just don't know how
No,
it's going to go.
right. No, if Republicans control the Senate, nobody's getting confirmed. And of course, if when Republicans, when Trump was in office and Democrats controlled the Senate, Trump said, I don't care. He just made everybody acting.
Right.
Remember, we had like 8 months of like the toilet bowl salesman being the acting attorney general. Like that actually happened in our lifetimes in this country, right? Like a toilet bowl salesman was the attorney general
Whitaker, was it Matthew Whitaker?
With Matthew Whitaker, right?
Yeah.
I guess he wasn't a salesman. He was a toilet bowl investor and
I can
aficionado,
picture the video though when he's like standing in front of the
right?
right, right.
For well endowed men who need a bigger seat. That was his stick, and he was the actual attorney general. So if Harris wins the White House, but Republicans control the Senate, then I think that Harris should just make everybody acting forever. And just like Trump did. However, that's not going to work for the Supreme Court. It's not going to work for justices. So for lower court judges. So if Democrats don't control the Senate, then there are no judges that the Republicans will confirm. McConnell already promised to do that
Mhm.
back when it looked like Hillary Clinton was going to be president, right? So we can be damn well sure that he'll do that. If he was willing to do that against Hillary Clinton, if he was willing to do that against the first black president, we can be damn sure he'll do that for the first black woman president. And he won't confirm a single judge that Harris nominates or tries to appoint.
The
So, like,
couple
vote
of
for John Tester if you're listening to this show and you live in
right.
Montana. Jesus God, please vote for John Tester, right? If you live in Ohio, please God vote for Sherrod Brown. Like the Senate hangs on the edge of a knife.
Debbie
And
McCarcel Powell. She's going to be
right?
on the show next week to beat Rick Scott. We had Colin Allred on last week, the congressman. Really good guy. I like him. I hope he beats Ted Cruz. That would change the game. By the way, is it a correct reading of the Supreme Court decision in the Trump immunity case that they've said that the president can talk to the AG and essentially tell them who to prosecute and who not to prosecute, and it's absolute immunity for that kind of action?
That's my reading, and I think that's correct. But I will say this, Dean, about the immunity decision. Amongst everything else, it is a terribly written decision. Just from a straight kind of legal process aspect, John Roberts's ruling is gobbledygook. It's really hard to know how to apply the standards that he sets because they are both so broad and yet lack such specificity, right? So yes, my reading of Roberts' ruling is that it probably is now suddenly legal for the president to pressure the attorney general into prosecuting the president's political enemies,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that Trump will surely do if he wins and if he's allowed to pick a new attorney general.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with our friend Elie
And
Mystal.
I will be one of those enemies, right? Like that's the other
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Right? Like I'm on the list of, especially when you look at some of the people that Trump is thinking about for AG. These are people that I fight with on Twitter. And Trump has already said that people who criticize the Supreme Court should be jailed. I mean, like
Well, I quoted you today to someone. Ellie told me he's not going to be on the first train out, but he's not going to be on the last one. And
right.
that kind of thing, like, we're not going to be the last helicopter in Saigon. We're not leaving that way. It's
You know,
going to
you
be
try. I'm not trying to make the last one because you might miss the last train.
right.
In
You
that,
got to somewhere in the middle. We're like,
right?
this is not going well. So, just briefly here, we mentioned DOJ and New York Mayor Eric Adams. The DOJ rule, we all know it by now, is 60 days out from an election. You don't do anything that can affect the election. That you think the term is like interfere with the election or have influence on the election. Eric Adams was not running for reelection, but indicting the mayor, who's a Democrat of the biggest city in America, 40 days out from the election, they knew Trump was going to use. Now he's not used it as adeptly as I thought maybe he would use it as. In fact, he tried to use it to say, "You see, they're weaponizing it," as opposed to doing the argument. Look at the crime in the Democratic cities. I thought that would be the argument that he could use that would be more effective. But who am I? He knows his white supremacist base better than I. But what's your reaction to DOJ charging? It's not like Adams was the crimes were going to expire. They could have waited November 7th and charged them. So why charge them 40 days out from the election?
Well, it just goes to show, Dean, that 40-day, that 60-day rule, that's not a rule. That's a guideline. That's a suggestion. That's not constitutional. It's not required by statute. It's just a suggestion the DOJ has implemented to save white folks from accountability, right? Like the only reason why that thing is there is because occasionally the DOJ needs an excuse to not charge a white criminal with crimes, right? You see that when it's a black guy, they don't have any problems violating their own suggestion and rule box, right? Like that. And again, and I say that not to absolve Adams from any of his crimes. I personally think Adams should resign. I think that he is corrupt and can't be trusted to lead the city. So I'm not saying that to absolve Adams from any of his alleged wrongdoing, but come on. I mean, like, what more evidence do you need? Of course, if Adams was a white man in office, the DOJ suddenly would have been like, well, we've got this guideline that says we can't indict anybody. But with the black guy, they're just like, screw it. That's it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, right? That's the code is more of a guideline than a rule, right? And that's what the DOJ is. That's always what it's been, though. And so, like, it's one of the frustrating things that I had with Garland kind of early on, when there was still a chance that Trump could be brought to justice. Garland is the kind of person that hides behind rules when it's convenient for him and ignores them when it's not. Like it's there's no there's no intellectual core, there's no ethical core there. He'll use a rule if it helps him avoid scrutiny and accountability, and he'll ignore a rule if it helps him avoid scrutiny and accountability. Garland
Merrick
is the
Garland.
worst, except for Bill Barr and the toilet
Well,
salesman
right.
and the inveterate racist. Just like he's the worst of the people who are not the worst.
What a wrong choice. And that what we can't go back. Look, when you look at the election right now, like it is very clear. It is a stark contrast. And Vice President Harris sums it well. They want to go back and she wants to turn the page. Uh, is it concerning to you, or maybe not? Concerning is not the right word. Is it surprising at all that so many Americans are supporting an open white supremacist whose campaign? And you know what I'm tired of, and I'd like to get your reaction, Elie. The people who give the exemptions to the well-educated white people and rich ones. Oh, they're in it for the taxes. No, they're also in it for the white supremacy. Let's not play games anymore. They see exactly what we do. This whole campaign is built on white supremacy. This one now with the black migrants, send them back and chanting, send them back at the rallies. This is just pure white supremacy we're seeing go on. Yet there's this pass given. Oh no, the guy in Wall Street, or Elon Musk is really not about the white. He's about, nope, they profited in the system that is a white supremacist system. But what's your take on that part of it?
Well, first of all, just about Elon Musk, the idea that the man whose fortune started because his father benefited from the apartheid rules of South Africa, the idea that he's not in it for the racism is just, laughable to me. I do think apartheid Clyde also enjoys the racism. And I think that's true of most of the rich white folks that support Trump. Yes, they like the tax breaks, but they also like the racism, or at least, and here's the thing, at least they're more comfortable with the racism than they should be, right? Because no, not to ruin my own financial possibilities here, but you can't give me a big enough tax break to be okay with the white supremacy, right? Like I don't you can't pay me enough to be okay with the white supremacy. Now, there are black people you can pay enough. Apparently if you have good flow and are a rapper, I mean that's one way to maybe the white supremacy is okay with you. So there are definitely black people that you can pay off, but I'm not one of them, right? And I think that that's what you see with the rich white folks, right? There are rich white folks that you can't pay off. There are rich white folks who desperately want the tax breaks, who desperately want to continue making all the money in the world and stuffing it in their ears and saying I won, but they won't support Trump because they don't like the white supremacy. I think Mark Cuban has been one of Kamala
Yep.
Harris's best surrogates in this election cycle, as he's been very clear about about the problems with the Trump administration. So there are white people that you can't pay off enough to endure to accept the white supremacy, and there are white folks that you can. And the white folks
Certainly.
that you can support Donald Trump. So it's all part of the same thing. In terms of whether or not I'm surprised, I mean, look, I was surprised in November of 2016. And it was on that night that I, dedicated myself to never being surprised again. Right? Like
Mm,
the election of Donald Trump in 2016 is what surprised me. And I've talked about this before about how the people who were most shocked on in November 2016 were educated black folks like me, right? Educated black folks like me, predominantly black men like me, who were just like, I never thought Chad would do this, man.
right.
I thought we was friends, right? Right.
Right.
Black women were like, told you about Becky. Black women were not surprised about how racist this country is. And frankly, more economically disadvantaged black men, poorer black men who from the block were also not surprised about just how racist white people can be. There wasn't a lot of shock in Compton when Trump got elected. It was shock in Jamaica Plain, and it was shock in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe Thurston Howell III did this, man. we
Right.
were we were the idiots, right? But at least for my part, I dedicated myself to never being that stupid again. And so
That.
no, nothing
So, what do you
nothing
think?
that white people do surprises me anymore.
This election, I've never seen an election this close, this late in this, and in every battleground state. Bunch of polls came out yesterday, today. Everything is in the margin of error. It could end up breaking in a way where, from an electoral point of view, one of them wins by almost a landslide, to be honest. But we're talking about this close. In your heart of hearts, how do you think this is going to go down?
Well, before we get on to that, I just because it's next week in the Nation, look out for this, because I did a whole piece on the Electoral College, and I
Okay.
just kind of needed to take a second to just remind people that it is freaking ridiculous that we are in a situation where Kamala Harris is almost certainly going to win the popular vote,
Mm-hmm.
that Donald Trump will almost certainly lose the popular vote for the third time in a row. And in no other functioning democracy do you have a candidate that gets his butt whooped in the popular vote 3 times in a row being treated like he is some kind of political savant, some kind of, Teflon Don, some kind of unstoppable political force. The man loses all the time. And the
Mm-hmm.
only reason why this election is close, the only reason why it's in the margin of error and we have so much fear and blah, 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 is because of the stupid, anachronistic, segregationist, slavery protecting system that we call the Electoral College. And so I actually wrote a huge piece in the
I
Nation
look
coming
forward
out
to that.
next week, just focusing on like how freaking dumb this is and how freaking dumb it is. The arguments supporting the Electoral College have become, how like reductive and insane making the arguments in favor of the Electoral College are in the modern context. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, let's
And that's great.
never.
We just had an expert on electoral who wrote a book on electoral college on a couple of weeks ago, talking about it in depth and where polling isn't on it. But a lot, we get like a minute and a half left. What is your gut feeling? I mean, just a prediction. I know it's speculative, but in are we going to be celebrating in a little over a month from now, or are we going to be looking at the train schedule?
I think she's going to win Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's very important.
I think she's going to win Pennsylvania. I think if she wins Pennsylvania, she'll the blue wall will hold, right? I think Wisconsin is probably going to be closer than Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Michigan is probably going to be closer than Pennsylvania, but she's polling better in Wisconsin and Michigan than she is in Pennsylvania. So if she wins Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, then it's technically over. And I do think that she will win those 3 states. I mean, we haven't got. I mean, just I know we only have a minute, team, but like we haven't gotten through October 7th yet. And we
Right.
know that the anniversary of October 7th is going to restart a lot of stuff. And we know the Democratic messaging is not great on this stuff. And we don't know how the Democratic pro-Israel, Israel right or wrong stance, if they sound like that, we don't know how that's going to change the ground, soften the ground, especially in a state like Michigan. So I'm still kind of worried about that. But fundamentally, I think she's going to win Michigan. I think she's going to win Wisconsin. And I think she's going to win Pennsylvania. And then Georgia, North Carolina, those are for the courts, right?
Right. And
Those are for the vote.
Nevada, but if you pick up Nevada as well, then you got that buffer state. You've got the three, and because you can win 270 without Nevada, if my math was correct. I'm pretty sure it was
Yeah.
correct. So if you add Nevada, I think it's six extra votes. That's an extra state, and that's good. And to me, on what's going to happen, perhaps in impacting Michigan or people who support Palestinians, is less October 7th, the anniversary, and more of if Netanyahu goes into Lebanon and turns it into Gaza. And if he turns a nation into Gaza, 40% of the country is Christian. There's a lot of Arab Christians here who may have supported, I think they wouldn't support Harris. And if they see this, that's my concern because people think about Muslims all the time. There's a big, robust Arab Christian
Yep.
community in this country. And if Lebanon, if they see their fellow Christians getting slaughtered and it's by our armament, and Vice President Harris doesn't speak out against it, she can't change policy, but she can speak out. Biden will let her speak out in the last month of the campaign. That it's more about the tone. But Elie, it's great chatting with my friend. It always goes so fast. Read Ellie's stuff at the Nation. I look forward to reading your long form article, and hopefully we can grab you one more time before the election, and then we can, talk about train schedules or what more fun stuff we'll be doing. So,
Train schedules or beer. It's really one or the other.
all right, brother. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being on.